Hello, this is James St. James, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about your relationship with your mind. Join me on my journey as I integrate ancient and modern medicine to reverse engineer intuitive healing so that you can re-engineer your body and mind to live vibrantly once again. How we think about our mind is critically important in terms of how we shape our mind and our personality so that we can become as successful as possible. When I was young, I didn't really think about how to take care of my mind. All I did was I just went to school and tried to meet my parents' and societal expectations. And in doing so, what I didn't realize is that I was only articulating a couple parts of my mind, such as memory and logical processing. However, those are only two of many components of the mind for which I didn't really think about exercising or making sure that those components stayed intact. Capabilities such as empathy and care and intuition, these kind of things I've accidentally lost throughout the years because I was just hyper-focused on the tasks in front of me. And what I didn't realize is that by putting my body through that and putting my brain to these tests, it was using up physiological resources for which I didn't know exactly how they were using up those resources and what kind of damage they would be doing to the organs to constantly be pushing the human brain to its physiological limits in terms of especially like neocortex processes, which can be very taxing on certain organs with the high amount of metabolic and oxygen consumption. So at this point, I've made plenty of years of mistakes and used my brain and my mind for achieving various things for which I achieved. But at the end of the day, I sacrificed my mental health in the process. I'm sure that we all want to perform better, especially with the mind. Maybe you want to become a TV personality or to become a famous music artist or even just be able to solve the difficult challenges at work. But maybe you feel that there's something that's holding you back, some bit of mental clarity or creativity, some reason that you just can't quite figure out whatever it is, this challenge that's in front of you in a quick, efficient way so that it makes it practical in your life. Now, we might say like, well, maybe that's just my personality. I don't have the personality trait to be a TV personality. I don't have the personality trait that it requires for me to be a master programmer and solve all these difficult function and logic problems. But you have to realize that every single human being is generally, when we're born, we're created in the same way. Your personality is merely just a reflection of the way that you developed in the societal circumstance that you've been in since you were born. To put it more clearly, your personality is just the intersection between your mental weaknesses and the societal expectations. So with that being said, it's not that you, just because of the way the moon's position and the stars and these kind of things, that your personality is shaped this way. You're shaped this way because you've taken a certain amount of damage into certain organs and certain parts of your brain throughout your life, just in really tiny, small ways. And in these really small ways, maybe this baby developed and that baby used a lot of logic and played a lot of games when that baby was a kid. And so that baby's really logical and can remember lots of things versus another baby that maybe went outside and played lots when they were a kid. And they would always help with the other kids and then they always share lots of love. And because they were using these things a lot, it allowed them to think when they were just 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, of how to articulate their physiology to adapt to that circumstance. Now, the circumstance for the first baby was to adapt to being able to solve logical problems. So maybe that child grew up into someone who could be like a good programmer or engineer. Then the other child grew up solving emotional problems, and maybe that person could become a nurse or a psychotherapist in the future. And so this is just how we develop. And the important part is that those two children, their mind or their brain is going to be intuitive in the sense of where it takes on stress. And so as we grow up in our certain environment, if we aren't using a particular area of our brain or aren't using a particular area of the body or organs or mind, then the stress that we take on will be carefully and specifically allocated into the areas that we use least. And it kind of leads you to that common phrase of if you don't use it, you lose it, which actually is very true when it comes to human beings. The reason why is that the human biological system, or for any biological system, is constantly adapting. It's not only adapting to its environment, but it's adapting to the way that we take on stress, because the ideal way that we take on the damage that's coming to us throughout our stressful lives, whether it be chemical, emotional, or physical stress, is it will place the stress in the way that least inhibits our functionality so that we can continue to function well and survive. Now, for a person who, say, grew up more on the emotional side, their logic part of their brain might suffer because, say, the spleen or the small intestine, which has a lot to do with our intellectual quotient or IQ, that might be a point where the body says, well, care and empathy are so important for me, so I'm going to protect the stomach. And in order to protect the stomach, I need to place this damage somewhere else, and right next to the stomach is the spleen. And so because our brain is making all these millions of calculations since the moment we were born to understand, it's like, okay, these are the most used areas, we need to protect those areas at all costs. Well, if we take on damage, then it's going to be very smart in saying, well, let's not put it there, let's put it there. And then through this, we've developed a certain stress pattern, and which has developed our personality. So this is why we have a personality, and the personality isn't so much something that is permanent. It's not set in stone, but it is as close as you can imagine a biological being to being set in stone, because it started, or that specific pattern of stress started back when you were probably a baby, and then it's just continually exacerbated or gotten worse since then. When it becomes more developed through time, it also becomes more solidified. This is because the stress compounds over time, and so those originally small damaged areas will become more impacted because stress is more likely to take on more stress, because it's not the area of the tissue or the area of the body or the mind is not structurally stable, it's not chemically stable, it's not electrically stable. Because it loses its integrity, now it's more subject to taking on more damage than the other more functioning, healthy areas of the body that are really well functioning and have really good flow and are also more resilient to taking on more stress. So this creates a very disproportionate way that the body takes on damage, and then that's what shapes our personalities. And this is where I want to differentiate how we think of the mind. A lot of people think of mental health and think of the mind in terms of what their personality is, and the personality is just an outcome of what's happening inside. But it's not something you have to stick with. If you can change what's inside, then it will change your personality. So if you think, oh, well, I'm an introverted person, oh, well, I'm not very good at logical things, or I'm not the most compassionate person in these circumstances, or I get frustrated easily. All these kind of things people will identify with over time because it's just normal in our society to do that, but it doesn't have to be that way. When I say it doesn't have to be that way, you can change it. And I know it kind of sounds like ridiculous. It's like, oh, I live with this whole personality my whole life. Like, how could I change it? You can change it, but admittedly, it's really difficult to change. Let's put it this way. You might have heard someone having maybe a near-death experience or some kind of psychedelic trip. And since that moment, their personality changed. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But a personality can change in as little as just one day or even one moment. With that being said, we can understand that a personality is not a static thing. If you want to increase your IQ, if you want to be better at remembering names, if you want to be able to figure out problems better or become a more compassionate person, these are all functions of the mind. And by articulating the way that the mind works and fixing the damage within the mind, then you can shape your personality or shape those strengths or the strengths that you desire to have into whatever way you want. And that can be done through the healing process. First, let's go through and also define what is the mind, because a lot of people confuse brain and mind. Now, the brain is what's known as the central nervous system. That is just one aspect of mind. And the way I define mind and the way that we commonly use it is the mind is all the components of us that determine at least a good bulk of, or the majority of, our personality or the way that we act and think. So we not only have the brain, which is the central nervous system, but we actually have 5 other nervous systems. So you have the central nervous system, which is the brain associated with the water chakra. Then you have the gastric nervous system in the stomach associated with the earth chakra. Then you have the hepatic nervous system, which is in the liver and is associated with the fire chakra. Next is the colonic nervous system, and that is in the large intestine and is associated with the air chakra. The 5th nervous system that we have is the enteric nervous system located in the small intestine, and that is associated with the light chakra. And then the last nervous system that we have is in the pericardium in the heart and is associated with the dark chakra. These are all the nervous systems in the body and are the main components of the electrical parts of our mind. Then, in addition to the 6 nervous systems, we actually have the 6 plexuses as well. What they are is from the spinal column that comes down through our spine, there's 2 nerve branches that go out through the holes on either side of the vertebrae and then innervate into a plexus. And a plexus is a neural junction where the nerves come in and some amounts of logical processing are able to be done in those junctions before going into the organs so that the organs can communicate with each other directly without having to tax the physiological processes of the brain itself. These plexuses, there are 6 of them. There is the coccygeal plexus, the prudental plexus, the sacral plexus, the lumbar plexus, the brachial plexus, and the cervical plexus, each associated with the 6 chakras. And then on the mechanical side are the 12 electrical pathways that run through the body. Now what these are just in terms of the 6 chakras, which don't really they're just points of reference, and those 6 chakras are the elements, but those elements are what exist throughout the body and is how we can label and understand each of the streams of electricity that run through the extracellular matrix that in their end result create the feelings of what we understand as emotions. Now, emotions are not actually created in the brain. They are merely just the way that the electrical impulses are flowing through the fascia or the extracellular matrix, the structure that composes most of our body. But the brain just interprets that feeling, that electrical current. And based on those interpretations, it's able to create neurotransmitters that activate other areas of the brain depending on what kind of emotion that we're feeling. And maybe you've even experienced that where you feel an emotion and then you react, like you're overwhelmed with an emotion, a sense of grief or a sense of joy. And then it's like, whoa, like, now I'm thinking different. This is the exact way that it not only feels in terms of a first-hand experience, but it's actually the way the body works. So emotions are a very body-like thing. And for the mechanical side of the mind, it relies a lot on the actual physicality of the body, because that's where the electricity flows through. Something like grief, since I already brought that one up, will flow through the front of your arm. And because of that, if the front of the arm gets damaged for any reason, whether it be from a physical thing or whether it be from hyperstimulation of this area from something like drug use, then from that moment forth, you're not going to be able to experience those kind of emotions in their full intensity. For those electrical pathways in the body, there are 6 sets, each with a positive and negative. And those 6 sets are, again, coordinated with each of the chakras. The earth chakra in positive and negative, the water chakra in positive and negative, the fire chakra in positive and negative, the air chakra in positive and negative, the light chakra in positive or negative, and the dark chakra in positive and negative. Those electrical impulses that move throughout the body, creating the feeling of emotions, originally come from the organs. As the organs are constantly processing very many chemical reactions in a biological way, the cellular biology is creating a certain electrical field. And that electrical field affects the fascia. The reason why is that the extracellular matrix of the fascia of the body is known to be piezoelectric. Piezoelectricity means that, like an electric motor that has wires running through it in a spindle, and then through putting a current into that wire, it generates an electromagnetic field that affects the magnets and then causes the rotation and the propulsion, say in like a electric car, so it makes it move down the road. In that same way that the wire creates the electric field, our fascia creates electric fields. And based on the biochemistry and the electrical reactions happening within or between chemicals, it creates electricity that then affects the fascial structure. And that structure carries the electricity. So the point of saying this is that it's really one system where you have these electrical components, and then you also have the nervous system that innervates with the fascia, and then you have the organs, which is the chemical side of our body, also affecting the mind through that interface where each chemical reaction then goes and creates a certain electrical charge that moves through our body as the feeling of emotions, which is actually just electrical impulses. Those electrical impulses are then innervated through the neural junctions that interface with the fascia, and through this are the 100,000 miles of nervature in our body can pick up and sense each area of our body, each muscle, each part of our skin, all the organs, the various tissues in a very intricate way, sensing pressure, sensing temperature. And then all that information goes up to the brain, or at least most of it. Not all of it will go to the brain, because there's like this process in the spinal cord that limits the amount of information. But all important information will go to the brain so that it can figure out in millions of calculations exactly what issues or what conditions that the body is in. Then based on those conditions and understanding, okay, here's how my organs are feeling, this is the electrical impulses, meaning the emotion, this is how parts of my body are, and this is where I'm positioned, it understands these things and then creates a response to its environment. This mechanism or this process of understanding this is where I'm at, this is my physiological resources, and this is my environment, and this is how I'm going to respond. That is the essence of mind and what shapes our personality. When we have a deficiency, such as maybe people feel a lack of energy. This would usually be associated with issues in the positive energy associated with the gallbladder. If the gallbladder is lacking in its positive form of energy, then what's going to happen is the person's going to feel less energetic. If somebody says something like, hey, I'm thinking of like my mother when I was a kid, can you take out the trash? Then my immediate reaction is, oh, well, it's so much energy. Because your body is already using these calculations in the brain to think about, okay, well, how much energy do I have right now? How many carbohydrates? What's my hydration level like? And it's all doing this on a subconscious level. This is why when you have something like a stomach ache, it's really hard to think and it's really hard to do much of anything, is because your brain is processing like, oh, like there's a really big issue here and we need to solve this first before moving on to doing work or school or whatever else. So in summary, it's not so much that the mind is the brain as the mind is the whole body. It's not every part of the body, but there are essentially 33 key components of the mind, whereas the brain is just one of those core components. That is the difference between the mind and the brain. So when we think about, okay, how do I articulate my mind or how do I fix my mind? It's not that you need to cut open the skull and do neurosurgery. That's not how you change your personality. But rather you can change your mind and your personality through a lot of the things in your body, because the brain as itself as an organ is really just the resultant factor among many conditions, because the brain's ability to process information depends a lot on how each of the organs are functioning. If, say, the liver was to decline in functionality, which is needed to be able to deliver glucose to the brain, well, if it can't store that glucose or deliver it as well, then the brain's easily going to become taxed and lose the amount of glucose that it has, which means that it's going to not be able to produce the same amount of ATP, and you're going to feel like you lost your train of thought. You're going to feel maybe even lightheaded. You can feel like you're mentally clouded. And it's not because there's something wrong with your brain, it's just that your liver is not delivering enough carbohydrates to make your brain feel like, okay, well, I have plenty of energy to do these mental tasks. And that is just one small example of how the organs affect the brain and how we think, which a lot of people would say is your personality, which comes from your brain, but it really comes from so many parts of our body. And this is why forms like yoga is said to be literally meaning the unification between your body and your mind. And it's not that we're trying to unify the body with the brain, it's that every piece of our body that has to do with how we think is now being regenerated or articulated, or to increase the flexibility so that we can transmit the emotions a little better, which reduces the stress on the organs and creates these generally good maintenance techniques so that each of the other 32 components of our mind besides our brain can be more flexible and adapt well to whatever circumstance we're in. And in that case, we would be unifying the mind by doing various exercises and postures, like in the yogic practice. Hopefully these tips will help you reestablish your connection with your mind so that you can regenerate your mind using practical and effective ways. So now that we understand the difference between the brain and the mind, we now have the knowledge and the power to understand that our personality and how we think and how we act in the world can be changed, and we can take control of that to shape our personality into the way that we want. So if you're feeling stuck, frustrated, irritated for any reason, or maybe you're even just lacking in mental functionalities such as memory, mental clarity, or creativity, then just know that these are just aspects of personality, and the aspects of personality are due to the mind. And the mind is rooted in a lot of physical places throughout the body. And if we heal, or we just fix the damage in those places, then we can fix those functionalities and be able to return everything that you were born with back to you. So we can get back your memory, we can get back your creativity, we can get back your sense of care, your joy. Everything like this, we can rebuild. You can rebuild through regenerating the tissues and the organs. You can rebuild through regenerating the electrical pathways. This whole entire series is dedicated to just understanding how to do that, or even why to do that, and how the body works, so that we can reverse engineer it and create those changes. Now, to some of you, especially if you haven't seen the other videos, that might sound like a really crazy idea. It's like, okay, how can we just go and start changing everything about our personality? It's not easy, but I do have a summary video on it. It's called The Healing Process. You can also find it in this channel. And furthermore, I also want to let you know that I suffered for many disorders for more than 10 years. And I also lost my mental functionality, such as memory, my creativity, my ability to logically understand things. And from that experience, it's what led me into this path. And I can understand how it feels to be lacking that. It's, one day I felt like I was on top of the world, and then the next day I woke up from a surgery and I could barely form sentences. And I was shaking, I was nervous, I was having anxiety attacks and panic attacks and seizures, when before I had never even had so much as a headache in my entire life. And being put from being mentally capable and then not being mentally capable the very next day, I had to struggle. I had to figure out how to find the solution to rebuild myself into a person who could even just talk to a camera and present myself clearly and logically. I mean, hopefully it's clear. And for me to be able to do this now, I had to go and I had to rebuild various parts of my personality, as we would say. But really it's just me restructuring my organs, the electrical channels in my body, and going through the healing process so that I could share this message with you, so that I can continue to live my life more fully, more mentally capable, and more able to do all the things that I want to do with my life. And that's really what led me to create these videos, create this series, and share this with you. If you want to learn more about me and my story and what led me here, we actually have a video for that in this series as well, so you can check that out. Best of luck on your journey to a more healthy and vibrant you. I hope you found this video useful. If you could think of someone who might benefit from this information, then please feel free to share this video or series with them. Also, please feel free to check out the other videos in this channel, as we're producing almost a video a week with the intention of bringing you tools to help you transform your mind so that you can improve your mental and physical performance. If you would like to support our mission to provide mental wellness to the world, then please consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Nootripure Foundation, for which is a link in the description. And I look forward to helping you create a better you.